Okay, I think we're going to get started. We hope folks continue to join us, but thank you all so much for everyone who's here right now. We're really excited for this event. My name is Ashley Freiburger, and I'm with the Oceans Caucus Foundation. I know that I've worked with a lot of you over the last couple of years. As you may know, OCF works to directly support the House and Senate Oceans Caucuses. Today, we're here to talk about the blue economy. Around 127 million people, or 40% of the US population, live in coastal communities, and the blue economy supports over 2 million jobs. Last year, NOAA released its Blue Economy Strategic Plan for 2021 through 2025, laying out a roadmap for new ways to advance America's blue economy and enhance the global ocean economy, which is expected to value in around $3 trillion over the next decade. But we're here to talk about what actually is the blue economy. There's been many definitions proposed, but we wanted to get together some leading experts in this space to talk about what the blue economy is and what it means for the US, as well as other countries around the world. And so before we kick off the conversation, have some housekeeping. Unfortunately, Dr. Robertson from Oregon State University wasn't able to join us, but we're really lucky to have Mark Farley join us. Mark works as the Strategic Initiative Director for Oregon State University's Hatfield Marine Science Center. And as we move into the conversation, if you have any questions for our guests, please feel free to put them in the chat. And before we get started, we have two videos for you, some words from Congresswoman Bonamici from Oregon and from Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island. So I'm going to share my screen with these videos, and after that, I'll hand it off to Dr. Leonardi.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Bonamici, and I represent Oregon's 1st Congressional District. I wish I could participate in person, but I'm pleased to be able to join you virtually for this important discussion about the blue economy. The panelists participating in today's conversation have important perspectives to offer on the blue economy and its future. This afternoon, you'll have the opportunity to hear more about the importance of expanding ocean innovation, supporting sustainable coastal economies, and balancing ocean energy development and other co-uses. Ecosystem restoration is one blue economy solution that can improve resilience and create jobs. A 2017 report from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, reviewing investments from the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act of 2009, found that on average, every $1 million spent on ecosystem restoration projects also supported between 15 and 30 jobs. The report also found that coastal restoration projects resulted in increased property values and recreational spending, while preventing millions of dollars of damage from storms and flooding. Restoring blue carbon ecosystems such as mangroves and seagrasses is one form of coastal restoration that can also help remove and store carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, coastal blue carbon ecosystems are disappearing rapidly. Expanding and restoring them is particularly important in light of the most recent IPCC finding that limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels will be impossible without removing carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere. As co-chair of the House Oceans Caucus and House Estuaries Caucus, I've worked to advance legislation that would support these critical restoration efforts. My bipartisan Coast Research Act will expand research and monitoring to improve our understanding of ocean acidification and coastal acidification. And my Blue Carbon for Our Planet Act, also bipartisan, will improve the mapping and conservation of blue carbon ecosystems. Both of these bills, along with the Blue Globe Act, which will advance ocean, estuary, and Great Lakes research, passed the House as part of the America Competes Act. I'm very grateful to be on the conference committee that will negotiate with the Senate on final legislation. I'll be advocating to keep these critical blue economy pieces in the final bill. Blue economy tools like ecosystem restoration will help us adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change, but ocean energy technologies will actually help us reduce emissions that contribute to global warming. In 2021, the Department of Energy estimated the technical potential of marine energy resources in the 50 states to be at 2,300 terawatt hours per year, which is equivalent to 57% of all U.S. electricity generated in 2019. Using just 1/10 of these resources would provide enough energy to power 22 million homes. In Congress, I've worked to increase annual funding for the Water Power Technologies Office at DOE, which helps to fund research, development, demonstration, and deployment of nascent marine energy technologies. And today, you'll be hearing more about Oregon State University in my home state, where they're constructing the first commercial scale grid connected wave energy testing facility in the country. As we work to achieve commercialization of marine energy, it's critical that we capitalize on technologies that are deployable, like offshore wind. Unlocking only 1% of our nation's offshore wind energy potential would create power for 6.5 million homes. The Biden administration's commitment to deploying 30 gigawatts by 2030 would also create up to 85,000 good-paying jobs. Moreover, as more projects are installed, the domestic manufacturing pipeline will also expand. Last year, Dominion Energy, an East Coast utility, announced that it would be building the first ever domestically manufactured vessel that will be used to install offshore wind turbines. This is just one example of the supply chain benefits associated with strengthening the domestic offshore wind market. Rapidly deploying ocean energy technologies will create new jobs, spur economic development, and will also provide a clean, affordable source of power. As this happens, it's critical that all ocean co-use considerations be at the table. The permitting process must incorporate feedback from all affected stakeholders, including commercial and recreational fishers. Robust dialogue is essential to building a blue energy economy that's sustainable and fair for all ocean users. So thank you so much to the Ocean Caucus Foundation for hosting this important discussion, and to all of the panelists for your participation. I look forward to our continued collaboration in uplifting and expanding blue economy opportunities across the country. Thank you.
All right. One more video with Senator Whitehouse. 1 second.
Thank you very much to the Oceans Caucus Foundation for organizing this panel and for making me a part of it. I will start by recognizing my co-founder, Senator Lisa Murkowski, who has been a terrific partner in oceans issues. I'd also like to thank our panelists for sharing their expertise on the blue economy across the country, from Rhode Island to Alaska. We are right now, as I record this message, waiting to have the Blue Globe bill and the Blue Carbon bill close into the final Competes Act. We are looking at the prospect of permanent funding for the Oceans and Coasts Fund out of offshore wind, and we are seeing success after success related to oceans. We're closing in on Save Our Seas 3.0 as a plastics bill. So it's a terrific time to be working on oceans issues. In my home state, URI GSO's Coastal Resources and RIC grant reports Rhode Island's blue economy has a value of more than $5 billion and supports more than 36,000 jobs. And some of them are just part of our Rhode Island way of life and history, in fishing and in yacht racing and in boat construction. During my time in the Senate, I focused on passing laws to encourage sustainable ocean use and help coastal communities thrive, and I've welcomed the support of the Oceans Caucus Foundation in doing it. I've spent years working with Rhode Island's blue economy stakeholders to advance blue economy innovation and strengthen our workforce pipeline. Christian Cowan and the University of Rhode Island have been key partners in those efforts, and I'm delighted to welcome him. Recently, I secured funding to support the Blue Tech Innovation Center at URI, which went towards equipment for research and development. I'm proud of all the Oceans Caucus work and all the accomplishments we've done throughout the years, and particularly, again, thanks to Senator Murkowski for the work that she has done to make Blue Globe Act and Blue Carbon Act bipartisan successes, I hope, in the Competes bill. These bills support healthy oceans, which in turn will support the blue economy. And I'm also pushing for a blue economy special initiative in the Economic Development Administration reauthorization to support communities that rely on our oceans. And I thank Senator Lindsey Graham for his support on that. As temperatures rise in the seas, we must monitor and protect the ocean ecosystems that we rely on. Thank you for all the work that you do to advance the blue economy and protect our oceans.
All right, thank you all so much for listening to the Congresswoman and the Senator. I'm going to introduce our moderator. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Alan Leonardi moderating today's panel. Alan is the president and CEO of the Consortium for Ocean Leadership, COL, which represents the leading ocean science, research, and technology organizations from academia, industry, and the larger nonprofit sector from around the United States. Prior to COL, he spent 18 years at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, most recently as director of the Office of Ocean Exploration and Research.
There we go.
Sorry, did I have some internet issues?
Just a little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit. Perfect. Sorry. Okay, back to Dr. Leonardi. At NOAA, he also served as acting director and deputy director of the Office of Policy Planning and Evaluation, manager for the Environmental Modeling Program, and deputy director for the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory. Alan, we're so happy to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time, and we're looking forward to the panel and your moderating. So I'll kick it off to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley, and thank you for the Ocean Caucus Foundation for putting on this event. Happy to be here today. If for some reason there's any internet issues that come my way, I will of course encourage the panelists to just keep talking to one another and ask each other questions if that happens. So hopefully we can avoid that. But before we get started, I want to thank you, Ashley, also for sharing the thoughts of Congresswoman Bonamici and Senator Whitehouse. Both are clearly passionate about the role the oceans play in sustaining our planet and indeed ourselves, and how important it is to embrace the oceans as not just a modern day resource, but also a possible ally in the fight against many of the challenges we face both today and in the future. They both also recognize the increasingly important role the oceans play in supporting our national economy, a portion of the economy that is anticipated to grow significantly in the coming decades, and which could, if not managed sustainably, place increasing pressure on ocean and coastal resources. During the next 45 to 50 minutes, we'll seek to have a deeper conversation about these topics and to delve into the topic of specifically the blue economy. Joining me for this conversation are three experts with diverse interests and backgrounds from across the United States. Cowan comes from Rhode Island, where he's a senior executive with more than 20 years of experience in technical manufacturing leadership in the IT networking, energy, and textile industries. He brings both domestic and overseas hands-on experience in his current role as Chief Operating Officer for the University of Rhode Island Research Foundation. His career focus on blue-green technologies has included technology implementation, policy guidance, and organizational leadership. Christian earned his Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Villanova University and Master's in Business Administration from the University of Rhode Island. Also joining us is Ephraim Farley, working in the marine sector. Part of the efforts at Oregon State University include the PAC-WAVE facility designed to support open ocean testing of wave energy converters and associated technologies, and the Pacific Marine Energy Center, which is a complementary collaborative research center focused on addressing the critical challenges associated with the marine energy, including research. Mark has spent 12 years building linkages between university research capacities and the needs of coastal industries, including active developments in Oregon's blue sector, where he has helped secure $2.5 million in state and federal funding to assist in the statewide effort. Clearly, we have a great panel here today with a lot of expertise, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Before the session began, we drew up virtual Zoom-like straws, and decided on the order for introductory comments and remarks. Christian will kick us off, followed by Ephraim and Mark, and each will give us about 3 to 5 minutes of some introductory comments before we get into a little bit of back and forth and questions and answers. Christian, would you like to kick in?
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate the introduction, and want to reiterate thanks to Ashley and the Oceans Caucus for the opportunity to talk in this panel. So I, as Alan said, am the Chief Operating Officer for the URI Research Foundation. Our organization is a nonprofit affiliated with URI. We are responsible for the intellectual property for the university. So that puts us squarely in between university and industry, which is a pretty exciting place to be right now. My background, as Alan said, so I am started from a technical background with electrical engineering and worked in clean energy fields, manufacturing, and some blue economy related startup companies throughout my career. So I have a good perspective working on campus as well as with industry partners. I want to give you a little bit of perspective on Rhode Island. Senator Whitehouse is such a fantastic supporter of oceans, but also of Rhode Island and I think the country. And I think he did a great job of framing out Rhode Island in a little more depth. We are a small state, but we have a large bay and essentially ocean run up right through the middle of our state. And we've got a long history of blue economy implications in our state. So really the sailboat industry had strong footholds here as marine companies grew up building America's Cup race boats in Rhode Island. And that entire industry was built off of Newport, Rhode Island as the races were here. And those manufacturers, those technologies quickly tied into academia and made sure that the technologies got into the sailboat. So there was a very quick relationship. As that grew up, we also have a very strong defense installation here in Rhode Island with electric boat building submarines and the Naval Undersea Warfare Center here from the Navy as well. So, and I have to thank Senator Reed, our senior senator, who is incredibly supportive of all these efforts, defense related, but also commercial related as it relates to the oceans and climate. One of the previous Secretary of Defense actually called Rhode Island the Silicon Valley of undersea technology. That's the depth of technology that we have here. So really the blue economy has existed in Rhode Island for many, many years. And Senator Whitehouse has years and years ago started really pulling it all together as a constant theme, both from a climate change and ocean impact, as well as an economic growth engine. We have recently here at the University of Rhode Island submitted a handful of proposals to really build off of what we have here from infrastructure, technology, resources, and really use that blue economy momentum as growth here in the state and as focus on climate change and resiliency. So we have some big proposals, some concepts on the table to really accelerate offshore wind here. I know that was mentioned. Rhode Island had the first steel in the water for offshore wind here, and the plan is to grow that, really build on that momentum. Aquaculture and fisheries, we've got very strong commercial operations here, and it is critical to make sure that that industry, and that ecosystem, that environment really stays healthy as we look into our oceans. It's a very strong workforce development component of this. URI, led by Jen McCann and the Dean of the GSO, the Graduate School of Oceanography here in Rhode Island, released a report on the size of the blue economy here in Rhode Island. 9% of our workers in Rhode Island are focused on the blue economy. We only see that as growing, as Senator Whitehouse has said, especially as we talk about, the last pillar of what we're planning on is a building on a smart bay. Hopefully we talk as a panel about sensing, mapping, big data, underwater communications, and the impact on that on the environment and climate change, I think, is critical. So we've got incredible momentum here in Rhode Island, looking to continue to build on it. and at the same time being sensitive to the larger global implications. So looking forward to discussing with the panelists.
Should I jump right in, Alan?
Please do. I was just trying to get myself off mute as usual.
All right, you're all good. Well, hello everybody. Ephraim Froelich. I am, as Alan said, a born and raised Alaskan who's spent what I think to be too much of my time back in Washington D.C. But I'm back in Alaska now, so I'm feeling more relaxed and a little. So yeah, my since Ocean Caucus Foundation and Ashley and Carolyn for hosting this event. Our moderator Alan for the kind introduction and his time here today. My fellow panelists for the important work on these issues, and especially Mark for your last minute fill in. Thanks for being here, so people don't have to hear too much from me. And all you busy folks who've taken the time out to listen to us talk at you about the blue economy, something we're all passionate about. I spend most of every day waxing about the blue economy in some way or another. So I know my family at least appreciates you taking some of the heat off of them. Last week at bedtime, actually, just real quick, my 4-year-old, I heard him ask my wife, "Are Daddy's ocean clusters a candy?" And it was, a good reminder that, you're never too young to learn about the blue economy, but we would also probably do well with, having some more well-established working definitions in these spaces, right? Because I think I have tried to explain to him what is an ocean cluster, and if you can't explain it to a 4-year-old, you got more work to do. And so I first started hearing about the blue economy when I was working on the Hill maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And, when people were first whispering about it at NOAA, and there was conversations about investing in the blue economy space and using that as a keyword to kind of pull these different things we're all working on together. But since then, as you all know, and we're all experiencing, the attention to the economic potential of our oceans has exploded, right? Both nationally, at the state level, nationally, and internationally. It's really exciting for somebody like me from a small coastal Alaska town, which I think we have so much to offer if we're able to kind of pull it all together into, overarching policy areas. Since founding AKWA-DC in 2019, I've worked with a lot of businesses trying to elevate conversations around the blue economy, as well as a particular focus, like Alan mentioned in his introduction to me, on ocean cluster focused businesses and work. Through those experiences, it's become clear to me that more has to be done to coalesce around broad definitions nationally in order to successfully communicate, who we are and what our goals are. And so recently, in partnership with the Ocean Foundation, AKWA-DC has helped lead an effort to engage with small groups of ocean innovation and blue tech stakeholders around the country. The goal of that effort, which is still ongoing, is to highlight both shared and differing understandings and priorities around the blue economy from 4 key regions around the country: the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. And this is not to say there's not other key regions, but these were where we started: Pacific Northwest and Alaska, New England, the Gulf, and California. And those roundtables definitely highlighted the need for shared understandings, of which there are some, right? And also just how different some perspectives also are. I'll briefly kind of run through some of those findings here that are just very early and nascent, but just to give folks an idea, of what we're hearing from people on the ground. Globally, the definition of the blue economy, as many know, is focused on the sustainability concept, right? The World Bank definition that a lot of us rely on as a standard is the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, jobs, and ecosystem health. Many stakeholders, though, around the country, believe that pretty strongly, actually, that concepts or values of equity and community resilience need to be a thread in there, right? There needs to be more community-based focused and some equity threads in there. But there's also an acknowledgement that these aspects are harder to incorporate into a definition, right? And the more things that you start tacking into these definitions, the more convoluted it gets, and the more difficult it all really gets, right? But one priority from folks almost universally is to make any definition as broad and inclusive as possible without losing meaning. So it's adaptable and inclusive, right? There's really concern out there in every region we spoke to about cutting out potential future blue economy stakeholders from any definition that gets put into federal statute or regulation. You know, we don't know what new industry could crop up and challenge existing assumptions and definitions, right? And so trying to plan ahead for that, while difficult to predict the future, if you make things broad and inclusive, it could help, right? It could allow for it more innovation, right? And so, you know, one kind of definition that we pieced together from a lot of different folks as comments around the country was, you know, the blue economy is sustainable use of ocean resources for equitable economic growth, improved livelihood and jobs, and ecosystem health. So it builds off of the, you know, the World Bank definition and kind of expands it a little. I'll drop that into the chat too, just so people can see that and noodle on it a little bit. That's nothing official, right? That's just kind of something we're piecing together to build off the World Bank definition. And, you know, that sustainability isn't a given. That's the one thing we kept hearing around the country, right? You know, you can do wind energy, for example, not to call any sector out. For example, though, in a way that is in conflict with the values of equity and sustainability, right? And so it's not automatic, it's not a given. But there is consensus, it seems, that a definition should focus on values over particular sectors, right? The definition of the blue economy should focus more on underlying values and less on, you know, saying this sector is in, this sector is out, right? Because there are sustainable uses of and applications in almost every sector. Yeah, and you know, I have more findings here, but in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of skip ahead and just kind of talk about there's a lot of really exciting things going on right now, as Representative Bonamici and Senator Whitehouse talked about. You know, there's around the country, we're seeing private and state level government investment in the blue economy, which is awesome. They're making important headway, but the strength of the federal government and really the pockets of the federal government is needed here, right? And you know, it's why it's exciting that there's so much interest coming from Congress. It was really exciting to hear, you know, 2 members come in and talk about the making, right? There's a lot of bills out there currently, both longstanding and brand new, regarding the blue economy and ocean tech. Just this year, multiple new bills have dropped directly addressing the space, you know, as we also heard. And I'll just quickly highlight 2 of those bills, and then I'll shut up and kick it over to Mark. But in February, the Blue Energy Innovation Act was introduced by Congressman Kilmer and Congressman Newhouse. The bill seeks to help the Department of Energy to leverage resources across all relevant federal agencies and national laboratories, but has a particular focus at Department of Energy to help establish a $75 million funding stream for innovation, and also a Center of Excellence housed there, which awesome. I mean, I'm very excited to hear that. And then also Senators Murkowski and Cantwell introduced just last month the Ocean Roi Act, which, you know, would create a program at the Department of Commerce with funding to jumpstart domestic ocean cluster investment, right? It creates a grant program based on the NOAA regions to have one ocean cluster at a minimum in each of those places, with funding streams going there as well, competitive funding streams. Really exciting stuff happening, and you know, those are things that I'm happy to talk about a little bit further. But yeah, in the interest of time, I'll stop there and just thank you so much for making this space for us to talk about these important issues.
Great, thanks, Ephraim. And Mark, why don't you close it out for us?
Yeah, you bet. I really appreciate everybody's comments, and it's an interesting space to work in. I think Ephraim touched on a lot of the nuances of changing hats in the blue economy conversation constantly. So I range in talking to the most basic kind of fundamental problems around workforce development for the blue sector, all the way up into creating investor portfolios to push money into the blue sector, and everything in between. I'd also add the additional nuance, and I know this isn't just unique to Oregon, but blue sector and blue economy regions are often also rural regions. So you've also got this underlying infrastructure problem around rural communities, and just the burgeoning development or lack of development and the barriers that puts in place for moving some of these conversations and some of these technologies and workforce and even housing and simple things like just supporting a workforce in a developing sector like that. So I feel like I dance a lot in and amongst a lot of conversations, and we are very fortunate to have both PMEC and PACWave, so a large wave energy development site here on the Oregon coast. So renewable energy is a big topic of conversation. A lot of our industries are starting to organize themselves around that concept and serving developers that are coming into the regions. I mean, little things like our cooperative, our CTE programs through community college and high schools, putting in a marine welding program to serve that developing wave energy industry. And it's that ripple effect that happens when we have significant projects. PMEC and PACWave received significant funding from Department of Energy, $80+ million to put that in. We are within a year of kind of cranking that industrial test site up. And then a lot of our research efforts, which Bryson, who could not be here today, leads, research around tidal wave energies, developing technologies, standardization. There's not a lot of standards in ocean energy. And so working with the university and university partners and industry partners to develop some of those standards. Just simply the plug, you know, how do we plug it in? There's a lot of development around that. I would say one of the things that I work on a lot in business and industry on the Oregon coast is bringing awareness to a lot of our coastal industries. They are part of a sector, that they're part of organizing and developing conversation, recognizing their interdependence with each other, and the fact that they can enter a conversation together when they have traditionally been separate and their voices have not been as strong. So there's a lot of excitement around that. So the blue sector, blue economy term has kind of caught on, and people are using it appropriately to really talk about how they work together. And that's exciting to me, that we can all come together with a common voice. So let's see, what else have I got here? We'll get into more questions as we go, but Oregon, I would say, I hate to say this, but Oregon is somewhat behind in this conversation. Washington State has done a phenomenal job. They have partnered with us closely to help us move our effort along. But I feel like Oregon's a little behind. We're ahead on energy, but behind in defining our sector. So thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate the comments and the comments of Christian and Ephraim as well. Obviously, there's a lot of diversity in the comments, but there's a lot of commonality as well. And I think we're going to get into those a little bit deeper as we go through the conversation. Before we do, though, I want to come back to this thing that Ephraim, you talked about from a definitional perspective and the need to really coalesce around a definition of what the blue economy is. You obviously gave a lot of thoughts. You gave some a specific definition of your own that you've been hearing from and proffering from the conversations you're having with the community, as well as definitions that are being used on the international stage. When I look at them, I think of kind of three distinct but intertwined kind of means that are involved in it. One is, of course, the overall contribution that the oceans provide to our economies. The second might be the need to address the environmental and ecological sustainability of the oceans when we look at economic development in the ocean space. And then, of course, the ocean as a growth opportunity for both developed and developing countries. Ephraim, you talked about this a little bit, so I'm really interested at this point, really maybe in what Mark and Christian, what your comments are on that. Clearly, there's no one firm definition that exists right now. There are a lot that have been shared. There's a lot of commonality, but from where you sit, what do you think would be definitionally important to think about?
I can start, Mark, if you'd like to. So it's, that's the first question that we get when we start talking, like, I think everyone is either what is the blue economy or how do you define it, right? It's I think we've all talked a lot about that in the recent few years. We really look at it as the intersection of ocean-based technology programs for economic growth, and as it intersects with climate change and resiliency. It's a very delicate balance. As we talk here about Narragansett Bay and reaching out into the ocean, there's a lot of value from an economic platform perspective of instrumenting the water, providing a platform for company growth and product and technology evolution as we think about underwater communications, unmanned undersea drones, fiber that's laid in the bottom of the ocean as well, and the sensing capability of it. And then if you think about, as fiber is required for offshore wind reaching up and down the on the East Coast area, up and down the East Coast, the incredible amount of data that that enables provides a true economic growth platform. But the intersection of that between climate change and resiliency is critical here. And that's really how we try to balance it and make sure that the technologies and the platforms that we're building for economic growth and to take advantage of the new learnings that we're doing around the ocean really have a positive impact on climate change and resiliency as our understanding in the world is dramatically shifting here. So it's that combination, that intersection between those two huge, in the past it's been a little diametrically opposed, but they're really coming together in a very important way now. And I would say as well, building what Ephraim and Mark said, tying the workforce into it, down through to a K through 12 level is absolutely critical. We're all higher ed, so tying in technology and science into these initiatives is important. But really, just understanding the ocean, understanding the water, and the importance that it provides the earth is critical. So, so it's really, that's kind of a spur off of that intersection, is making sure that that kids we're educating our youth in terms of not just the opportunities and where the ocean's going, but also the importance it is globally. And even if you don't live on the shore, the importance it is to you off the shore. So absolutely critical. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I spend most of my time defining this question for everybody, and it becomes either a sophisticated or kind of a basic conversation. I actually have a graphic I just carry around on my phone. It's like, do you see yourself here? And water dependence is generally how I start the conversation. And then we drill down into, what about coastal resiliency? Yep. What about coastal engineering? Yep. What about community development? Yep. What about planning for sea level rise? Yep. What about blue technology? Yep. It grows and grows and grows. And that for the audience in this conversation, it can sometimes be frustrating. It's like, well, what isn't it? And it's like, well, we're talking about communities and industries who are interdependent around our coasts and our oceans. So if you're way, way, way inland and you're dealing with the ocean somehow, you're invited to the party, but that's generally not your conversation. So it is what I am also finding, and as we talk about blue sector, it gives coastal communities an identity that is really lacking. And again, as I said before, the ability to enter the conversation and feel like you are part of a larger voice is one of the powerful pieces of this. Certainly for Oregon and for Oregon's coastal communities, that has been very valuable. It's almost a morale booster too, we're important, we're part of a conversation. People recognize the value of our presence and our contribution to the economy. And I think that's a pretty powerful piece of that definition that we go through. And yes, everything that Christian said.
Really, really appreciate that. And I'm being mindful of time here. We could probably talk about this definitional issue for the next couple of days, honestly. But why don't we kind of change gears a little bit and think about something you have all touched upon, right? And spaces that you're all working in, which is really technology and innovation. We are clearly at a stage in our world history where technology is rapidly changing. quite frankly, in some cases faster than we might be able to adopt them and address any policy implications arising from them. What are your thoughts on current trends in the technology and innovation space as they relate to blue economy and ocean issues, as they relate to policy issues, and quite frankly, as they relate to this continuum between venture capital, philanthropic, private sector investment, and sustained investment by government, which I think you all touched on a little bit. Ephraim, we didn't give you a chance to talk the last time, so maybe I'll put you in the hot seat to start this one out. How's that sound?
That sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we all hear about right now is kind of the industry technological innovation, right? But there's also a data and research innovation part of this that sometimes gets overlooked, right? That is hugely important to any of this moving forward. So that's something I always try to stress to folks, right? Is this isn't just a resource-based industry for technological innovation here, but to have a truly sustainable blue economy, there needs to be also that data collection and research innovation portion as well, and that investment from the federal government. So when I'm talking about ocean clusters, right, we're pulling in, it's not just industry tech, right? We're also pulling in folks from the government side, but also from private sector side who are looking to do data collection and that science aspect to truly be able to have a sustainable and inclusive blue economy. So I'll stop there, but that's just one piece I always stress people to remember.
Really important point. Mark or Christian, you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I think about common threads, and it's interesting. I'm from a university, so it always sounds like science and ocean monitoring would be my answer. And what I find is that industry, agency, and a lot of private developers also need ocean monitoring. Aquaculture farms, how much effluent can I dump into X body of water? I need a cheap sensor. In fact, I need 50 cheap sensors all over the ocean bottom to make sure that I'm being a responsible citizen in this space. I find that delightful, refreshing, and exciting. It's not just science that wants to monitor the ocean, it's also industry. Now, they're there and monitoring for regulatory reasons, but great. Let's do that. Let's be responsible citizens. And we talk a lot about sustainability, and providing people tools so they can be sustainable is really important. I see a lot of autonomous vehicle development, both for private industry and resource extraction and science. And our wave energy platforms, the ocean's rough on stuff. Putting people on boats is expensive. So how do we develop technology that actually lets us service these large platforms, these expensive platforms, in a reasonable way? And there is a lot of exciting innovation around that space. And again, I like the fact that it is a spectrum from private industry to government. We're all working to develop the same kinds of tools, but for different reasons, which allows a lot of shared innovation space. And that's exciting.
Excellent. Christian.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more, Mark. I completely agree with that perspective. And I'll add one more aspect to it too, is dual use applications for the DoD, right? That there's another aspect that kind of even makes that bigger. There's a little bit of caution that I always have in terms of making this too big to be able to execute. But to address your comment, Alan, about funding, from a federal funding standpoint, we have seen, so the URI was awarded NSF money to build a new research vessel called the Narragansett Dawn. So $125 million new research vessel, which is great. But we're also, there's also NOAA money that's supporting some work here in Rhode Island, and EDA money. There is, between NSF and NOAA and EDA and DOL and Commerce as well. It really could take all of those funding sources to address the technology that we're talking about, implementing the workforce development, the K-12 programming to bring into that, the infrastructure, the Graduate School of Oceanography here in Rhode Island, we're constantly having to upgrade in a good way. And two, I think it was Ephraim's point, that the big data aspects from a data center standpoint to create digital twins to really take all this data that's coming in from sensors. We're looking at it here as a potential of multiple funding sources to fund different parts of it. The economic impact of it could be huge. So it's great from my perspective. It's great federal funding potential, but we look at it, and I think we could look at it even more as different sources funding different pieces, from research to workforce awareness, all the way up from commercial, and again, that federal funding, I think, is a good precursor to the private and venture that could come in later. So big potential.
Yeah, excellent comments all. I echo them personally. Particularly, I think that there's this balance between R&D that's happening in the philanthropic and the industry space, which by the way is outstripping combined what is happening in the government space. Which is great, and that includes investment capital, venture capital, and things like that. But there needs to be a demand signal from the government, right, from a sustainment perspective, because there's certain things that just simply will have to be sustained. So agree with those things wholeheartedly. The three of you also touched upon something I think that's really, really important in this conversation, and that's about the workforce. The current workforce and the workforce of the future, and how we handle workforce development, whether it's trying to capture the excitement of the K through 12 set to get them into either degree programs that are going to have you work in this space, or non-degree approaches, right? Whether it's 2- and 4-year colleges, universities, trade, or technical schools. If the blue economy expands in the way that we all anticipate, there's going to be a dramatic need for an expansion of that workforce, technical, quality, skilled positions. If you look at the ocean science and tech workforce today, it is decidedly not diverse. So how do we tackle some of these challenges? And then the other aspect of this that I think is really important from an economic perspective is that historically, when there's been a big economic push in a given sector, the benefits have gone to a relative small group, right? And in this case, we're talking about things that need to benefit those who have historically been underrepresented, particularly when you're talking about things like climate justice and environmental justice and how we handle resilience. So how do we improve upon and make sure that the workforce of the future is representative of the beautiful demographics that we have in this country? And then as a result, that's all cycling back into our communities in positive ways. Do you all have thoughts on that? Anybody want to jump in first on this very minor question?
I'll quickly jump in from a Southeast Alaska boy's perspective. And, I think, as we're looking at any of these spaces, whether it's aquaculture or any of these kind of set to boom spaces, right, there's also in pretty much all of this coastline, traditional users who have been here for millennia. And there needs to be deferential space at the table created and made for Indigenous stakeholders around the country to continue their stewardship of our oceans and our water-based lands. And so, that's something that's that equity and justice piece that I touched on earlier in the definitions, right? And if we're truly going to make a long-standing defensible future here in the blue economy, that needs to be at the forefront of all of our minds. And it's, that's not an easy road to hoe for folks who have been working in the space and not thinking about that. They're focused on innovation. They're focused on in their lane, but that you have to bring that piece into your brain and be making those connections with those, traditional stewards of these spaces. Again, yeah, not an easy one, Alan. You're exactly right.
No, not easy at all. But I agree with you. And we often forget that while we're talking about a community that has technology producers and technology consumers, they have knowledge producers and knowledge consumers, we can't forget that the knowledge history here is hundreds or thousands of years old. It's not 50 years old. And so we need to make sure that we're incorporating that in appropriate ways. Mark or Christian, do you have comments on the
Thank you, Ephraim. That was well said. And I echo all of that. And then I appreciate this piece of the conversation because the workforce is generally the boring part that nobody wants to talk about. It's always about the innovation. If we don't have a developed and standardized workforce in this blue sector conversation, we lose. And what I am struggling with in Oregon is that a lot of our NAICS codes that address jobs, they don't have the blue sector represented there. And so it's very difficult to get workforce dollars invested in a sector when those codes don't exist. And I consider this a pretty dumb problem. So for our state economist, the blue sector doesn't exist because those codes don't exist. So when it comes to investing state money into this workforce development space, you have to do a lot of dancing. So we're looking at investing in data studies to define these new job sectors, and that would allow investment into the space. So that's kind of job one for me, and it's like kind of say the boring stuff, but it's important to growing this sector.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm sure Christian will add in and probably will comment upon the kind of defense and national security applications of this as well.
Yeah, we're lucky enough to have an extremely dynamic workforce program here in the state of Rhode Island. And I previously led the manufacturing extension partnership here. So we integrated in with all the manufacturing companies and really worked in those underserved communities. And the punchline that all of us know is it's really hard. And when we start, a few years ago, when we started saying this blue economy is growing, how do we pull people from the underserved communities? The people that have not worked in depth in there before said, well, we'll bring those people to the coast and have them do programs here. And I'm glad Mark is laughing because that just does not work at all. So we're really talking about trying to bring the ocean to the communities. That's a good colloquialism, but is difficult to do. But you really have to embed in communities before you even really try to define what blue tech means, much less bring them to the coast. So, and the defense, because you asked Ellen as well, the defense community here is very strong and suppliers into Electric Boat and the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. And the workforce implications of that are also huge. And it introduces more barriers. So we're really trying, again, very difficult, just to bring programming, more kind of career exploration, and not just for K through 12, but adults as well, kind of career exploration into those communities, into spaces and into community events. But it is incredibly critical to all of our conversations here, and equally as difficult. But good topic, and I think it seems like my partners across the country are all kind of struggling in the same way.
Yeah, no, indeed, difficult, but important topic, right? I mean, not just workforce development, but how we embrace this in a truly inclusive way. One thing that strikes me is that from an educational perspective, a K through 12 perspective in the United States, the place you learn about ocean science in high school is primarily through earth science. We don't really have an ocean-focused curricula. And as a matter of fact, there's really very few nations in the world that do. One nation is moving forward more aggressively in that regard than others. So how do you think we compare today in the development of our workforce to, say, other nations? Mark, you said if we don't deal with this, we lose. And that's not just a state or a regional or a national perspective, right? I mean, this is something that it has international implications. So how do you all think we're doing today? Are there things that we could be doing better?
I've been encouraged by a lot of programming that's taking place around the edges. So K through 12 has got a lot of nice curriculum about ocean sustainability. So I feel like we're doing well. And then as we move up into high school, we start having programs like CTE and career connected learning programs, which really are internships, placing students in ocean related industries to do practicum work and really understand what careers and opportunities and options for them are in that space, and then pathways to higher ed. And then when they get to higher ed, we have a lot of development, at least Oregon State University, around interdisciplinary studies that weave marine science and policy together, human dimension work and ocean work together, ocean engineering and human dimension work. So I think that's the key to success, but we've got to run. and
Yeah.
do it fast.
Excellent points. I think Ephraim's going to chime in, and I really appreciate you bringing up kind of the ethnographic piece of this. That's important as well, right?
Yeah.
But
Well,
Ephraim, please.
I was just going to mention that you got a National Ocean Science Bowl winner here from high school, and those are the types of programs that we should be pumping up, right? I was lucky enough to be at a high school here in Southeast Alaska that had an oceanography class for juniors and seniors to take, that I accessed that pathway and really was able to nurture that. But as you go to that national competition, it became very apparent that we were one of the only high schools where this wasn't an activity, an extracurricular activity, whereas I was doing it from my classroom, right? And so those opportunities are rare, but it creates blue economy weirdos like me in the long term. And so those are the type of things where funding streams and mechanisms should be made available from the federal government to invest in those types of national programs, as well as internships and job programs like has been touched on already.
Before Christian jumps in, I just want a disclaimer for everybody in the audience that I did not pay Ephraim to say that. We do run the National Ocean Sciences Bowl. So thank you. Great to see, our champions hard at work. Christian, please.
Yeah, and I can't agree with the sentiment of funding specifically targeted for that. We have CTE and we work with CTE programs across state. We don't have any ocean-based or blue economy-based CTE programs. I've been involved with the robotics programs, and there's other business, music, etc. And I think sometimes, even I mentioned the Big Bay that runs up in the middle of the state. Some people take it for granted that everybody thinks that the ocean is right here, but it's just not, and people don't have reach. And sometimes it's as easy. And again, to repeat what Ephraim said, that the funding into these programs are important. Reading about coastal communities and resiliency in a book is one thing. Having touch tanks in school, there's a very dynamic youth education program in Newport, Sail Newport, that does not just sail, they do a lot of educational outreach, and they have done a lot of studies of when people touch the water, right? With touch tanks, put your feet in the water, pull up the seaweed. They are much more likely to stay in it, in some occupation or even recreation. So thinking a bit outside of the box, and that's a little bit of when I mentioned bringing the ocean to the people, makes a big difference from an impression standpoint down to the youth.
Really appreciate that. I'm recognizing that we're just about at the top of the hour. Ashley, you'll forgive me for having us run long with what I'm about to do, but I want to close up by asking each of you to try to summarize in maybe one sentence. I know this is going to be hard. If you had a magic wand and you could fund one thing, or you could make one major policy statement or move, what would it be and why? Anybody want to go first?
Alan, man.
Come on, man.
So we just ended on workforce. I need to fix a whole lot of stuff around that. And it's really policy and process, the role of community colleges, the limitation of their mission. I need to fix a lot of stuff around that to make this go faster.
Awesome, thanks. Christian, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, same thing from a policy standpoint. I would look for, from a workforce standpoint, but what is really needed there is to be able to, the ability to fund and build buildings, buy equipment, fund instruction, maybe stipends for students, bus rides for kids to the coach. It's all of that, which means it's kind of braided funding coming to allow for a true, and that's K through 12 up through sciences and data and IT as well. So if there's an ability to kind of fund all of those parts are important to really build a sustainable workforce pipeline into the blue economy.
Awesome. Ephraim.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, funding needs to come from the federal level, right? I think the action needs to come from community and local levels, right? And so that's what I want to see, right? I want to see as few strings attached coming from the feds to fund local and community-based investment in the blue economy. And that's why, one last plug for those two bills that we mentioned in the beginning, the Blue Energy Innovation Act and the Ocean Roi Act, both of them create locally stewarded funds and programs for blue economy innovation and investment. And I know that's a tough ask when you're going to the Fed to say, give us a pot of money and don't worry about it on the back end. But we can have metrics, and that's part of having good definition. Way over a sentence, but yeah, that's me.
Hey, it was a tough question, I admit. So I want to thank you, Mark, Christian, Ephraim. I want to thank you all for being here today. Ashley, I want to thank you and the Ocean Caucus Foundation for hosting and having this event again. Hopefully, we have all learned something. I know you've been recording this. This can be shared and posted. But Ashley, at this point, I guess I'll turn it back over to you to wrap things up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody. Ephraim, do you mind dropping in the chat before folks sign off the names of those bills? Awesome. Thank you. I'll keep it running long enough for you guys to get those. Thank you all so much, Alan. Thank you for doing a great job at moderating, especially in your circumstances. We wish you the best for tomorrow. And thank you all for so exciting of a dialogue and putting up with some technical glitches here or there. I really appreciate it. I'm going to let this go on for just another second. Ephraim's looking for the second bill. There you go. Perfect. And for those of you who are still hanging with us, thank you so much. Oceans Caucus Foundation puts out a monthly newsletter where we summarize all the oceans happening at federal level, Congress, off the Hill, all around the world. And we'll include a link to the bills that we talked about today. And we'll parse out this recording, and we'll also send that out for the April newsletter. So I want to thank everybody one more time. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.